As I say, we are discussing Europe and Ukraine, the global challenges, addressing them together, or maybe not quite as together as some would wish. As you will see, I've been joined here on the stage by Dmytro Kuleba, who is Foreign Minister of Ukraine. Foreign Minister, I'm delighted to see you. Thank you very much. And I'm hoping, indeed, there we have it, President Kersti Kaljulaid of Estonia is joining us too. Madam President, can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Virtual Solutions, an Estonian company. I am able to join you from Nairobi, Kenya.
You're in Nairobi, Kenya. Well, we would ask you to abandon thoughts of the work you're doing in Kenya for just the next half hour and focus your mind on the relationship between the European Union and Ukraine. I'll turn to the Foreign Minister in a moment, but Madam President, I'd like to start with you. How would you characterize the EU-Ukraine relationship right now?
Well, European Union is not very much unified in how we see the future cooperation between Ukraine and the European Union. Personally, I have always advocated for allowing our Eastern partners who so wish to come closer to the European Union. Of course, there are still opportunities to work with the association agreement and the free trade agreement which Ukraine has to tighten economic relations and build the economies together into the better future. This opportunity is there. But the Baltic states and also Poland and me personally, we always ask ourselves this question: can the bus doors now close and the bus leave without those countries who still have European aspirations and who also got out from behind of the Iron Curtain in 1991 and who have had a late start to build a country of rule of law? Are they really in a hopeless position in the case of their demand to join the European Union? And I always seek positive affirmation that there must be in the future opportunities for Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, if they so wish.
But,
I've advocated for this quite a lot.
Madam President,
but the big problem
forgive me for interrupting.
For me personally has also been that then people say, I mean, you're crazy. They are still light years from fulfilling the Copenhagen criteria.
Madam President, thank you. Forgive me for interrupting you just then, but I did want to follow up on what you were saying, because you will be well aware that you did cause a good deal of consternation in Kiev when, I think it was just last month, you said that you believed it would be, I think 2 decades, 20 years at least, before Ukraine could possibly contemplate joining the European Union. Why did you say that?
Because, you know, all future predictions are based on past experiences. And as a president of Estonia, I've had to deal with the problems of Estonian businesses in Ukraine. For example, one Estonian company has gone through international arbitrage even to get the business back to their rightful owners. This show has been going on for a whole 5 years. I've been president of Estonia. No progress. Then, this summer, I heard of an Estonian company who is close to having a really good digitally transformative deal in Ukraine, being approached by a lawyer who didn't disclose who their client was, but who was clearly asking to share the business in order to fast forward the cooperation. I mean, for me, this tells that in 5 years' time, we have not moved ahead in fulfilling Copenhagen criteria. And we know that coming closer to the European Union only can happen when you fulfill them. So if I'm straightforwardly, really seriously taking the past experience to the future, the curve is even flatter. But I thought I will still, be hopeful. I am hopeful. And I've been to yes conferences earlier as well. reminding the oligarchs that the value of their own assets will rise if they were liquid, but they're not liquid because the value of their assets depends on the political picture and the links to politicians in the country. That's why Mr. Pinchuk has invited me to YES conferences to forward this message again and again and again. I'm now leaving my office as President of the Republic of Estonia, and I will not have any more opportunities maybe to convince at this level also the European authorities. And this is one of the boxes where I tick and say, a check, I didn't manage to make progress. And I'm sorry about it because I deeply want Ukraine to be one day part of the European Union. I really hope that when the window of opportunity in the future one day opens, and we all know that this window of opportunity stays open about 2 hours, that Ukraine is ready to go through that window. But the precondition is Copenhagen criteria. You cannot start fulfilling them when the window of opportunity is open. You will be too late. If it opens 9 o'clock in the morning, it's closed 10:15 latest. That is how history has taught us to think. I really hope for Ukrainian European future. And not only Ukrainian, Georgian and Moldovan future as well. But my experience says that we need to talk openly and honestly. And that's why I was not very, really angry to see that the previous panel was overrunning. Because I've never heard so much straight talking about the problems. And we have to be open and honest about the problems to move into the future. So indeed, I also wish this debate, which was now rudely interrupted, I apologize, for our panel, it will continue in an open format until we get the Copenhagen criteria fulfilled by Ukraine. And then people like me, my successor as Estonian president, can ask from Brussels, why not Ukraine? And the answer will not be, well, you know, it's obvious.
Madam President, that's a terrific contribution, and I thank you for it. And you talk about openness and honesty, and you've certainly given us that just now. I also appreciate your comments about listening to the last panel, because clearly you speak as a friend of Ukraine, and as you put your emphasis on the hope you have that one day Ukraine will be able to fulfill the Copenhagen criteria, will meet the conditions for EU membership, but you are being honest when you say that right now Ukraine is nowhere near it. Foreign Minister, rather than complaining about the honesty of people like President Kaljulaid, should you not be welcoming the fact that she is forcing you and others in the government to face an uncomfortable truth, that right now you simply are not in a place to talk in any meaningful way about joining the EU in the short to medium term?
Hi.
Hi.
Who is complaining on what the president is saying?
Many people in this country were complaining.
No. We have to be open and specific. Who is complaining on what president is saying? The Ukraine is not the country that complains. We have heard many things from many friends, partners, people who pretend to be friends. We know who is sincere, who is playing. This is life. Second, Ukraine does not need to be forced to do anything. Ukraine is capable of managing its own destiny. Every time I do a business travel abroad, I have 2 lists on my file. The first list describes the problems of companies from that country operating in Ukraine. And the second list represents the problems of Ukrainian companies operating in that country. And we do not complain, we discuss those problems. And if you dedicate a separate session to problems Ukrainian companies are facing in entering and operating on foreign markets, I think it will be packed with businessmen complaining on issues they suffer from. No one is saying this country does not have problems, but I would like to ask one simple question. Did all countries exceed the European Union only after fulfilling all their reforms and meeting all Copenhagen criteria? Who can answer that question?
May I?
Madam President, why don't you, yeah.
Yes, European Union allowed countries to join when they had fulfilled much more than Copenhagen criteria. Fulfilling Copenhagen criteria is something which you have to do as a precondition to get to the serious negotiations. I believe that all countries who joined fulfilled them at the point of entry. But thereafter, the elder colleagues, the member states from the European Union, have felt that in some countries, conditionalities were not strong enough. And actually, this kind of thinking has been also very visible in the Ukrainian and European relations. I deeply regret once there was a referendum in one member state about visa freedom to Ukraine. But it took place, and it took place because indeed people were worried that if we are, for political reasons, ignoring the necessary level of conditionality, then we will later not be able to roll back in time and say, hi, it now seems you didn't fit the conditions, so we should never have, cooperated with you so closely. This experience on making really absolutely sure, to be really sure that all countries rock solid fulfill the conditions, is the lesson which has also been learned by the Union in the past. And that's why they are nowadays as well stickers to these conditions. And whoever says that for political reasons, one day 400 million European citizens would agree that let's overlook the conditionality and enlarge because we have really good geopolitical reasons, which I agree we do have actually. This is not going to happen because the European Union doesn't enlarge this way. It enlarged this way. You fulfill the criteria and then you accede to the European Union. And indeed, my conscience is clean. I am always talking to giving opportunities to Eastern partners, to support more Eastern partners, to bring them closer and so on. But I also know, because I was part of our negotiating team when Estonia joined the European Union, how tough love was meted out to all of us.
Thank you. And Foreign Minister, I'm sure you were listening to that very carefully, but the message seems to be there is no point complaining that some countries in the past were given an easier ride into the European Union because lessons have been learned in Brussels, and that easier ride will not be given to you, and you have to accept it. And maybe you should take President Kaljulaid seriously and focus not so much on full EU membership, but on developing a different but closer relationship with the EU.
I wonder how President Kaljulaid would have reacted to your proposal.
I really want a full membership for Ukraine one day. I'm not saying accept lesser. I'm saying I want full membership for Ukraine, but I know it can only happen with conditions. I am not the one who says, well, this is never going to happen, just accept the kind of a midway solution. No way. There has to be an opportunity, possibility, but indeed conditional.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I didn't mean to suggest that you were saying this intermediate stage was the end point, but you do seem to be saying that because full membership is a long way in the future, maybe right now Ukraine should just focus on building a closer but different relationship for now. And I wonder, Foreign Minister, what you make of that.
Well, first of all, I hope we will not spend the entire time of our discussion without covering the topic of our discussion, how Europe and Ukraine can address global threats together. But listen, let's speak frankly, this is a brainstorming session, right? As I read it at the entry. North Macedonia cannot enter the European Union not because it lacks reforms, right? But because there are political issues around it. I'm not asking for a waiver for Ukraine. No. What I'm asking, what I'm suggesting, and I never complain, is to recognize a simple fact that accession to the European Union is not only about reforms. And the political decision of EU member states to accept another country as a member is not based on reforms only. Stop keeping this country on the hook of the reforms. Reforms are important. I am a reform-driven person myself, and I'm doing the best I can to help this country transform itself. But I'm tired of seeing how other countries mentor us with reforms without saying the truth. That we do not want you in the EU because we are politically not ready, not because you are not ready in terms of reforms. And again, I want to avoid any misunderstandings. We need reforms for the sake of this country. We will continue with reforms. This is an absolute fact. And we are not seeking any excuses. Stop treating us this way. Second, in early 90s, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and many other countries heard exactly what President Kaljulaid is now saying to us. But they heard it from Western European countries. Forget about the EU. Do not even think about it. Wait until we make decision. Transform yourself. This is the truth. I remember reading an address by Lech Walesa to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe in early 90s, where he was crying out to Western Europe, what are you doing? Why are you abandoning us? And bringing this conversation closer to the topic of our discussion, I'm absolutely certain that to play big in a global struggle, Europe has to get bigger.
Right.
And has to get stronger. And Ukraine is an asset. It's not a problem. It's an opportunity. This is the point. So if we approach this relationship from a sincere standpoint, things will look completely different. And my only question to the European Union is very simple. And I'm raising this point in my meetings with EU officials and with key EU capitals. Guys, what is your strategic vision for Ukraine? Give us an honest answer. We've been playing the game of constructive ambiguity for years. Like, we are not giving you the membership perspective, but do as much as you can, and then maybe one day it will happen. Fine, tell us the truth. We are at the point where we have to know. Is that if we're going to end up, if you see us in this eventual membership, that's one strategy. If you do not do, then we will have another strategy. But we need an honest conversation with the European Union. We need an honest answer from the European Union, and that is the point.
All right. Well, I think that has been a fascinating exchange about the notion of Ukrainian membership in the European Union. And as you rightly say, Foreign Minister, we're here to talk not just about that, although that is very important, but we're to talk about Europe and Ukraine in the context of global strategic challenges and the geopolitical situation. So, President Kaljulaid, I'd like your perspective on this thought, that the truth, and the Foreign Minister's just been saying, please tell us the truth. The truth is that Europe is very divided in terms of a strategic vision, for example, of how to deal with Russia, which of course is extremely relevant to Ukraine. If one looks at the German decision on Nord Stream 2, if one looks at the stance of the Hungarian government, if one looks at the stances of the governments of, say, Greece and Italy, there is no clear, coherent strategic vision in Europe about, for example, how to deal with Russia. Would you accept that?
Absolutely, because European Union does not have a foreign policy pillar. We don't have a common foreign policy in European Union. We are an economic union of the four freedoms based on common values. Among these values, the strongest, the first and foremost, is indeed rule of law, separation of institutions, the strength of the institutions to be able to guarantee democratic processes and equal treatment and level playing field also in the economic matters. This is what is the main binding cement of the European Union together. Foreign policy is not a pillar in a treaty. And that's why European Union obviously has a lot of discussions among ourselves, how we see different processes in history. But I would still like to return to one element of what has been said here. I totally accept and regret that European Union, even when conditions have been fulfilled, withhold the beginning of the accession discussions with some countries. And I also accept that many people told us in the 90s that this is hopeless. But this doesn't mean that it makes your position stronger in negotiating with European Union without fitting these criteria, which are the cement of the European Union. What was Estonian and Latvian and Lithuanian tactics in the 90s was precisely this. Look at us, independent institutions, built according to your own suggestions, functioning, can demonstrate they do actually take also sometimes people in politics who err to the court. That a small company, a local company, a foreign company, when they go to the court, they're treated equally. Look at us, media freedom indexes in low teens. Look at us, why not us into the European Union? This was the negotiating position. And you know, we didn't do these reforms to accede the European Union. We did it because we realized Estonia cannot be the state we were dreaming of if we do not fulfill, the same criteria. These criteria were useful to our own economy and to our own freedoms. They are still very useful to making sure that we stay on the path of being an open European country, a rule of law state with a free media. You have to have all this. And then, of course, you can tell Brussels and people like me that you are not, taking us on board despite us fulfilling all these criteria.
All right.
And these criteria cannot be overlooked because they are the essence of the European Union. And now if I turn to Russia and foreign policy of the European Union, we have agreed 5 principles after Crimea was occupied on how we collectively work with Russia. We may have tactical differences in our thinking, but strategically we have held these principles in place. We speak with one voice. We apply the sanctions. The level of complaining about whether sanctions are functional or not functional, yes, this may be relatively high. But we all recognize that when Georgian partial occupation happened, Europe was not strong enough. It was too quickly back to business as usual. And that might be the reason why the avalanche thereafter reached Crimea. Now you may say we haven't had, progress yet. And I plead daily with my generation of politicians to look at what our predecessors had to do. For 50 years, they didn't recognize the occupation of the Baltic states. They didn't tell 7 years thereafter, this is not functioning, let's get, to normal business with Soviet Union. Let's forget about the Baltic states. They never did. They had strategic patience. And I trust in my colleagues of this generation of politicians. We all have strategic patience. We demonstrated it in Crimean platform, where several European countries, including our Nordic neighbors, were represented at the highest possible level. We do support Ukraine.
All right.
We do have a single voice when we talk about Russia. But I think things for individual countries will be much easier if they were, clearly understood as countries with whom we can do business, invest into, so on, so on.
All right. Madam President, thank you very, very much for that contribution. And before I get another thought from you, Foreign Minister, I just want to we've got Carl Bildt here. You can't see him, Madam President, but he's here and he's listening very closely. Carl, I just want to ask you, on this idea, I think, that the Foreign Minister planted with us just a short time ago, that Europe, the EU, maybe we can talk NATO as well, these institutions need to understand that in geopolitical and strategic terms, they need Ukraine. It's, we shouldn't just focus on what Ukraine has to change and do. We should also focus on the degree to which Europe, NATO needs Ukraine. Do you think in Brussels they get that to the extent that they should?
Well, they get that, absolutely. The independence and sovereignty of Ukraine is a fundamental European strategic interest, no question about that. And as the President said, there might have been divergences on Russia policy inside the Union, but I think the amazing thing isn't that one. The amazing thing is that the Union has held together on this particular issue and has held together on measures against Russia, against all expectations. Against all expectations. Every single decision has been unanimous. There have been the occasional case in sort of the past with the individual foreign minister going to Moscow and saying sanctions are wrong and we'll do something. But at the end of the day, around the table, unanimous decisions, month after month, year after year. So it's a fundamental strategic interest, no question about it.
Right. Well, sanctions is one particular issue, but surely a fundamental signal would be saying to Ukraine, both in terms of NATO, yes, there is a clear pathway to membership, a membership action plan, and in terms of the EU, yes, we are looking to embrace you as soon as possible as full members of the European Union, and that isn't the messaging right now.
No, that isn't the messaging. But the messaging is there in Article 49 of the treaties. And that is a unanimous message, which says that every European country that is willing and able to fulfill the conditions of membership can apply. And that applies to every European country. And the truth is that every European country that has applied has been admitted at the end of the day, or accession negotiations has been started anyhow. There are a number of accession negotiations going on. But then the truth is also that if I compare it when Sweden became member and even when Estonia became member slightly later, somewhat later, the EU today is a more ambitious undertaking. There are far more policies to align to. I mean, I remember when we were aligning with agricultural policy, it was hell of negotiations for years to have whatever conditions. Competition policy, rule of the law, internal market regulations, whatever. Now there is far more ambition. The European Union has advanced. That's a good thing. But it also means that you have to go a longer distance to come up to that particular level. And there's no compromises on that. One final point just joining what the President said. I think what has happened, and that's a change in the EU that has to be said, that one is now stricter with the criteria than in the past. And that has to do with Poland and Hungary. Rule of law is absolutely fundamental to the functioning of the single market and other things. And we have seen that it might be that the instruments that we have are not enough in order to handle challenges inside the European Union. I think that will lead to sort of harder criteria or harder looking at the criteria when it comes to new members. That's essentially something that is good for the countries that are applying.
Sadly, we are short of time, and therefore I can't bring audience comments in the way I'd like, because we had so much commentary in the last debate. We're sadly pretty much out of time. But Foreign Minister, you've patiently listened to President Kaljulaid and now from Carl Bildt as well. I asked Carl Bildt whether Brussels gets it, having heard the contributions from both of them, who both sincerely say, look, we're friends of Ukraine, but this is the message we have to deliver to Ukraine. Do you, having heard them, think they get it in terms of your message that they need Ukraine?
Well, as representative of the nation, I am patient not in my personal capacity, but in my capacity of being Ukrainian. But when we lose our patience, we proved it in a number of occasions through history, we become very proactive. I don't think we have any disagreement on the importance of reforms. We are on the same page with the Madam President, with Minister. I do agree that EU should be commended for being able to design a coherent Russia policy for the first time in its history, and it was made in response to the Russian aggression against Ukraine. This is the fact. I do agree that the threshold of accession is much higher now than it used to be, but I insist that the issue of accession is first and foremost a political one. And if you look at Western Balkans now, you see that being implemented as we speak. It's about politics. And if the European Union internally, you don't even have to tell us, we will see it from your actions. If internally you make the decision that Ukraine is one of us, we will see completely different dynamics of supporting reforms moving forward. This is the decision that has to be made.
All right. Foreign Minister, I thank you for giving us a great thought to end on, a big thought, and it's important that people reflect on that. President Kaljulaid, we're going to say goodbye to you because we're going to lose our satellite link to you any moment. We've loved your contribution and we thank you for making time, even on a trip to Kenya, to talk to us here in Kiev. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me. And indeed, I also hear the bitterness, and not only Ukrainian, but also those who already fulfill the criteria and are still waiting to start their negotiations. They are right too. But indeed, I mean, I and all Baltic states and Nordic states, we've demonstrated through Crimean platform that we are friends of Ukraine and we wish Ukraine all the success on its road to one day to the European Union and hopefully also to NATO membership. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.